Middle Way Philosophy, Introductory Video 3B, Adapting to Conditions, How Provisionality Leads to Good Effects, by Robert M. Ellis. This is a tributary video to video number 3 on provisionality. The goal of the middle way and its practice needs to be put as broadly as possible and as flexibly as possible so as to relate to the experience of all human beings and their integration. That's why I prefer to express the goal of the middle way as addressing conditions. But what are conditions? They're any kind of event or experience that affects us. For example, physical changes in our environment, such as global warming, say. Social and political conditions, such as a change of government in our country and changes in laws that would follow that. Health and psychological states, for example, the effects of falling ill or of getting older. We interact with all these different kinds of conditions, with our earlier responses shaping our later ones, whether these are physical, socio-political, or more individual. In any of these ways of acting, we can be more or less adequate, we can have better understanding, we can have more appropriate values, we can take more responsibility. Addressing conditions can also be understood as adaptiveness, or as adapting to conditions. This is dependent on our provisionality and our optionality, each of which has already been explored in separate videos. Provisionality, as we've seen, is our ability to respond to new conditions. That ability to respond depends also on our optionality, how many options we have available to us, not only in terms of external facilities, but in terms of our own imaginations. Adaptiveness can be symbolized very well in biological terms by the rat. The rat is a highly adaptable animal. For example, if its environment changes, if its food source dries up, it has the resourcefulness, the optionality to find new resources and new food sources. By contrast, the panda is well known for not being so adaptive. That is, it has fewer options, both in terms of external facilities and in terms of what its brain can cope with. It's very dependent on a particular type of bamboo. So, if that bamboo dies back, the panda suffers. Both the rat and the panda get on fine as long as the conditions remain stable. However, it's when an unexpected problem comes up that having a wide range of options makes a difference, as opposed to having a narrow range. Confronted by the unexpected problem, the rat will adapt. The panda, on the other hand, may well die out in response to that problem. If you compare that to a human response to new conditions, for example, a bereavement or the disproving of something you've believed in all your life, there's a similar issue at work. Do you have a wide range of options, or have you narrowed your range of options? The middle way requires adaptiveness, but in a broad sense, not in a narrow or reductive biological sense. So the middle way should not be confused with any kind of biological reductionism or social Darwinism. Instead, it might help to consider Maslow's hierarchy of needs as an indicator of the very great variety of needs and desires that human beings have, and thus the great variety of conditions they need to engage with. Not only do we want survival and reproduction at the bottom of Maslow's pyramid, we also need safety, we need relationships which involve love, belonging and esteem, and we need what Maslow called self-actualization. That can include the value of things like morality, even aesthetics and creativity, the value of discovery and achievement, and possibly the middle way itself. The conditions that human beings need to address can also include both positive and negative values. On the positive side, there's the value of pleasure, discovery, achievement, relationships or beauty, for example. So the kind of conditions we can address might be how to find more sustainable pleasure, for example, or more adequate achievement. On the negative side, we want to avoid suffering, pain, frustration, falsehood, ugliness. These are just examples of things we might seek to avoid, driven by various kinds of needs and conditions. Again, we can address that better, perhaps by trying to avoid a cycle of suffering that we might otherwise get enmeshed in. So here are some key facets of what might be meant by addressing conditions. Survival, for example, we address conditions by gaining supplies of food and water, by gaining shelter of the kind that we need to survive. Social needs are addressed by forming relationships, particularly sustainable relationships that nourish us in the ways we need to be nourished. Individual aspirations might mean anything from completing an artistic project to maintaining a community organisation, completing a career as a doctor. There may be a wide range of aspirations that we have. Avoiding suffering, on the other hand, might be something like coping with a health problem or addressing depression. In the video on optionality, we talked about how any kind of optionality might help us to reach our goals, whatever those goals are, in any of the kind of conditions that we've just been talking about. If we set off to reach our goal but we're frustrated, and perhaps if we try a different track and that's also frustrated, maybe the third time we'll win, maybe we'll gain the goal we wanted, maybe also we'll have to change the goal. Maybe many attempts will be needed to reach the goal, many different strategies requiring different options to be activated. The main point is the way in which having greater optionality, having different possible ways of doing it, enable us to reach our goals, whatever they are. Whatever our goals will be actuated by values or desires. If those desires are actual in the sense of being ones we experience, that are linked into our context, then those values are much more capable of fulfillment. That is, not perfect fulfillment, but rather fulfillment within the rough and ready terms of our experience, interlinked with many other goals, interlinked with our embodied experience as a whole. Idealized values, on the other hand, are values that are simply held in the left hemisphere, in the abstract. Those values are not actually capable of fulfillment. They tend to be self-reinforcing, kept in a positive feedback loop, whereby idealized values simply reinforce more idealized values, rather than leading to an endpoint where we can move on to the next condition. All these points can also be related to the two mules story discussed in the integration video. You can see at the start, the two mules want contrary things that are not compatible with each other. Those two mules are stuck in idealized values. They don't have alternative options. They're simply stuck in one kind of response. It's when they pause and take stock that other options appear to the mules. They're then able to adapt to their conditions much better by working together to eat one bale of hay and then the other one. So think of the rat and the panda here. The two mules have moved from starting off being like pandas, being narrow, having a lack of adaptability. They've moved on in a broad sense, not just one of survival, but a broad sense. They've moved on to a more integrated and more adequate way of engaging with their environment. So, to summarise, addressing conditions or adapting to conditions is the goal of the middle way. Conditions are a wide range of phenomena that we interact with. It could be physical, it could be social, they could be psychological, they could work on an individual or on a social level. We address all conditions better with optionality and provisionality, when there are other possibilities for ways we could respond to a new situation. Adapting to those conditions isn't merely a matter of survival or avoiding suffering. So the kind of values we should judge by should be broader than that and should take into account the wide range of values that human beings can experience. Whatever values we experience can be fulfilled better if we have more optionality. Sometimes, though, there will be clashes between values, and those require integration. That's where a whole element of practice is involved in middle way philosophy. Addressing any condition is good in its own terms, but integrating our valuation of those conditions is even better.